All right. Hello, everybody. It is Thursday afternoon, about 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And for the record, I am here on my lunch break. Boss, if you end up watching this at some point, I'm not on the clock. I'm taking my lunch to do a quick recording / live stream here because I don't think I'm going to have time to put together a curated video later. But since the hot topic of discussion this week is multi-classing, I've seen the community more polarized than I've ever seen it. And I just wanted to share some thoughts. We know it needs help. We know that Iron Mesa said this is experimental. If it doesn't work, they'll roll it back. But there's a lot of people that have been having a lot of fun with multi-classing despite all the problems. But I think we can all see that its current state is not sustainable. And I think we knew that to begin with. So the question remains, how do we fix it? Is it actually viable? And I want to go through a few things here. This is going to be short and sweet because I do have to get back to work. But I want to talk through this. If you guys are kind enough, leave your feedback. I don't think I know everything at all. This isn't going to be an exhaustive solution, but I do think this hopefully will get more productive discussions going and set us in the right direction. So let's jump in. What's up, Tim? How's it going? All right, so what are the 3 key considerations? 4 is the bonus down here at the bottom, but let's talk through what the key considerations or guiding principles should be for multi-classing. Number 1, you want to reward effort and investment / skill while allowing for reasonable attainability and accessibility for casual players. That balance is really, really difficult to strike, but we're going to talk about what we might be able to do to achieve that. Oh, sorry. Thanks. I'll turn the music down. There we go. Second, we want to retain some semblance of class identity. That has been a huge topic of discussion, and we'll get into that. Number 3, we want to prevent game breaking / OP builds. And number 4, this is something that does factor into the equation. I know there's a lot of people that will claim it shouldn't matter whether or not they have to build a bunch of new stuff. It shouldn't. In an ideal world, it shouldn't matter, but we don't live in that world. They're not a AAA studio. Iron Mace has limited time and resources, so we do have to consider utilizing existing game systems and mechanics whenever possible to minimize new development on their end. So that sets the stage. And by the way, this is not a Ryan 6 days a week video here. I wish I could put together something that was a little flashier. This is going to be more like a boardroom presentation. For those of you guys that might be tuning in for the first time, I know it shouldn't matter, but a lot of people like to say their qualifications before they dive into stuff like this. I've been a solution architect for 10 plus years. I'm into data visualization, data quality, ETL process, basically anything to do with data. And I've been around, I've been working for 30 plus years, but only the last 10 to 12 have been in that arena. But I've learned a lot from that. And I feel like in this particular case, one of the most important things is to define what we're going for and then what any real big problems are. So in the business world, it would be define your problem statement and then start brainstorming solutions. So rather than writing a formal problem statement here, we're really just going with the guiding principles. That's it. On to the next step. What are the factors that are going to be involved? What are the high-level solution approaches for addressing multi-classing? Well, number 1, we need to address token acquisition, pace, and quantity, and that definitely has an impact on how we reroll or mind wipe. Number 2, we want to address pairings of skills, abilities, spells, perks. And from here on out, whenever I'm talking about skills, perks, and spells, I'm just going to refer to the group as abilities. Lastly, we've got constraints and restrictions, and that'll probably be one of the more controversial parts of the video if there is any. All right, so let's look at number one that we were at right here, multi-classing considerations. Number one, we need to reward effort, investment, skill while allowing players, more casual players especially, reasonable attainability and accessibility into multi-classing. So in this recent hotfix, they accelerated experience rewards, which I think was a great move. I think it's around 400 XP per level after 20 right now, but to keep it simple, I'm suggesting like why not just keep the existing accelerated leveling under 20. Once you hit 20, it's 500 XP per level. Seems perfectly reasonable to me, and it jives with the other bullets here. So you attain master of a class at level 20. 13 tokens, in my opinion, is too much. You cap it at 10. You give a token at 20, 25, 30, and 35, and 40. From that point on, you go to every 10 levels, 50, 60, 70, and the last two are at 85 and 100. So you have kind of this gradual step up of every 5 levels, which makes it a very easy way to enter for your casual players. It's still rewarding people that are putting in more effort and investment at 40, 50, 60, 70, 85, and even 100. And I think that balances things out fairly well. But again, let me know your guys' feedback. I know I'm talking through this like I'm spewing gospel here, but based on all the feedback I've seen, I feel like this would be a happy medium for everyone. It is. 10 is a lot, Madcap, but we're going to get to that in this next part. So the next guiding principle here. Last but not least, the reroll mind wipe service. I think that could be tweaked a little bit. Personally, I like the idea of you being able to go to the fortune teller and twice a week buy a rare mind wipe service that would get you the ability to reroll one single ability. Then also once per week, you could do a full wipe, which would be the epic version of that. And I think you should probably just make it use it or lose it. I don't really like the idea of stockpiling those services, but you know, that could be up for debate. All right, moving on. How do we retain some semblance of class identity? The first thing here is I think you have to max the number of abilities you can get from any single class at 4. That would exclude the Grandmaster. So if you're a solo player or just a player that only wants to level 1 class, when the Grandmaster comes out, you should be able to get all 10 abilities from him without penalty. Next, all multi-class abilities should start at a reduced power level. Remember, the idea here is that if I'm a wizard, I should be the best at being wizard. No other class should be a better wizard than me. So reducing the amount of abilities that I can learn from another class, I think helps to achieve that. Furthermore, if you go and limit the power level of all multi-class abilities right off the rip and set them at 75% of max. So an example would be if you picked up Sprint, Sprint has a 50 ms speed boost, it goes down to 37.5. For lesser heal, instead of healing you for 15, it goes down to 11.25. Savage, etc. So from a implementation standpoint, this, yeah, it's going to require extra coding, but I think it's relatively straightforward. And I think in the UI, adding this to the UI, it could be as simple as putting a little bubble with the number on any multi-class ability that says what power level you're at. And then once you have acquired that ability, every time you level with it, you raise that 1%. and you cap it 100. So again, you're getting progression, you're getting dopamine hits, and you're not right away as good at something as the native class of that ability. All right, moving on. How do we prevent game breaking and OP builds? Well, the previous recommendations do solve for part of this, but I think the other thing that you need to do is introduce native only properties on certain class abilities. So these are just examples. This, again, not gospel. I do want to hear you guys' feedback. I think ultimately there is going to be some level of manual curation that needs to happen on Iron Mace's end, and it's going to be driven primarily by player feedback. And that's going to be the benefit of the rest of this season, is that we're going to be able to identify these really toxic pairings of skills, spells, and perks. So examples would be only a cleric can have Divine Strike or Smite. You can do that because it's thematically more appropriate, or you can do it just simply to prevent overpowered synergies. Warlock would be only the Warlock can have Demon Form or Soul Collector. Fighter can have Slayer and Swift, so on and so forth. These are just examples. Again, this would have to be really, really well thought out. But the mechanic that would need to be introduced is basically this idea of a native-only ability that cannot be multi-classed into. Lastly, I think the other thing that's super important is creating trade-offs here. Right now in the current implementation, which again, we know is experimental, it's very, very raw. But one of the key things that will allow this to work is creating trade-offs. I don't know if stat requirements is the way to do it, but I feel like that might be an option. You could, for example, say that anytime you wear plate, each piece of plate armor that you wear reduces your spellcast speed by 5% or 3% or 1%, whatever that is. And I think you can look for opportunities to do that in other places as well. They love Dungeons and Dragons. D&D would be a great reference for ideas here. I don't want to get down as detailed as things like encumbrance, but you do need to have some kind of trade-offs, in my opinion, that are just not going to allow for everyone to get anything and everything. That's really the key tenet here. No class should be able to get anything and everything that they want. There should be really cool new builds and player expression that comes out of this, and it should be a ton of fun. And yeah, people will always find a way to get some kind of meta, but the thing that's really, really cool about multi-classing is I think it breaks a lot of the existing meta. It opens up so many potential builds that I think we'll see less and less of the same thing over and over again, just inherently. That is kind of one of the things. So yeah, that's the thought on that. Last but not least, because I do have to jump off here and get back to work, some bonus recommendations. One-shotting is toxic. It's awful. For those of you that are doing it, you love it. You've got a windlass crossbow, you hit a headshot. Maybe you feel that that is earned and one-shotting should be in the game, especially if you come from Tarkov, any other FPS where there's snipers. A lot of you are going to hate on this. That's fine. I don't care. In this game, one-shotting mechanics suck. And I think one way to address that issue, no matter how much damage is coming in at you, you have a damage received cap of 99% of your max health. Your max health. So if you're at full HP, you cannot be one-shot. This mechanic already exists with the Lich Circles. Again, want to hear your thoughts on this? I'm pretty adamant about this, but I could be convinced otherwise. So have at it in the comments. One other thing that certainly comes up now that we are talking about multi-classing is adding more affixes on gear that would make it more interesting for both PvP and PvE. One of those things could be increase all specific multi-class abilities. That could be an affix or an enchantment on your armor. So you could have increase all or increase a class specific. Now, if you do that reasonably, if it's increase all, hopefully it's a very low number. And if it's class specific, you bump it up a little bit. So maybe if it's increase all by 1 to 3%, then a class specific range would be something more like 3 to 6%, something like that. You could also increase native abilities effectiveness by X%. Just ideas, throwing that stuff out there. I feel like there can be a lot more, again, build diversity and expression if we start to focus on the way that the enchantments are working and not just make them purely damage and power based. Although I know these are, I think these would be interesting things to add as long as you're capping the multi-class abilities at 100% and you don't let the native abilities get out of control. And maybe that's a terrible idea to begin with, but just throwing that out there. All right. That is it. I wanted to keep this short and sweet. If you guys are here in the chat, you are awesome. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to leave this one up on YouTube so I can receive all of the hate that it will generate from the not so happy Redditors that have deemed multi-classing dead on arrival. I don't think it is. I think we can make this really, really good, but it's going to take constructive feedback and solutioning from the community. And I'm here for it, guys. Appreciate you all. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.